The most dramatic angle, Spartacus was never trying to overthrow Rome. He was trying to leave it. The most dangerous man in the Republic wanted nothing more than to walk away. And Rome could not allow that. The tragedy is not that a slave fought an empire. The tragedy is that an empire could not let a man be free. 6,000 men hang from crosses along the Appian Way, and the crows have not yet finished their work. The wooden beams stretch from Capua to the gates of Rome itself, 130 miles of agony nailed upright for every traveler to witness. Some of the men are already dead. Most are not. Their breathing is shallow and wet, their wrists split open around iron spikes, and the soldiers who mounted them there have moved on to the next body with the efficiency of men building a fence. This is not war. This is a message. Somewhere among these 6,000, perhaps near the front, perhaps already unrecognizable, is a Thracian whose name the Senate will spend the next 2,000 years trying to forget. He had no throne, he commanded no navy, he held no office and minted no coin. He simply refused to die on his knees. And for that, Marcus Licinius Crassus, the richest man in Rome, has turned a highway into a graveyard, because the Republic understands something that will echo through every empire that follows. The most dangerous thing a slave can do is prove he does not have to be won. The man they are trying to erase from history was called Spartacus, and he was never trying to conquer Rome. He was trying to walk out of it. He was born in Thrace, the wild and mountainous land Rome considered barely civilized, sometime around 111 BC. The ancient sources disagree on nearly everything about his early life, and that silence itself is telling. Rome kept meticulous records of its generals and senators, but almost none of its slaves. What we know is this: he likely served as an auxiliary soldier in the Roman legions before some act of desertion or defiance saw him captured and sold. Plutarch tells us his wife, a priestess of Dionysus, was enslaved alongside him. She reportedly prophesied that a great and terrible power surrounded him. He was sent to the ludus of Gnaeus Lentulus Batiatus in Capua, a gladiatorial school where men were fed well, trained relentlessly, and kept behind iron bars like prized livestock. The gladiator was Rome's most perverse invention, a man stripped of every freedom except the freedom to die beautifully for the entertainment of those who owned him. Spartacus trained among Gauls, Germans, and other Thracians, men who had once been warriors of their own nations and were now property measured in sesterces. The school at Capua was not unusual. By the 1st century BC, Rome's economy ran on human trafficking of staggering proportions. Conservative estimates suggest that between 1/4 and 1/3 of the Italian peninsula's population were enslaved people. They worked the latifundia, the vast agricultural estates. They rowed the galleys. They cleaned the sewers and built the aqueducts and died in the mines of Spain and Sardinia. The Republic was not a civilization with slaves. It was a slave civilization that produced philosophy and marble as byproducts. In 73 BC, Spartacus and roughly 70 others broke out of the ludus using kitchen implements as weapons. The details survive because they are almost absurd. Cleavers and roasting spits against guards in armor. They seized a wagon of gladiatorial weapons in the streets and fought their way to the slopes of Mount Vesuvius. Rome sent a militia of 3,000 under the praetor, Gaius Claudius Glaber, who blockaded the only path down the mountain and settled in to wait. What happened next revealed the quality of mind that made Spartacus unlike any rebel Rome had encountered. His men wove ropes from wild vines, rappelled down the unguarded cliffs at night, and fell upon the Roman camp from behind. The militia scattered, and from that moment the revolt ceased to be a nuisance and became a catastrophe. Slaves from the surrounding countryside flooded to Spartacus in numbers the sources describe with something approaching panic. Within months, he commanded an army of perhaps 70,000. He organized them into units, trained them in Roman tactics, forged weapons from the iron of captured estates, and defeated one Roman force after another, not through blind fury, but through discipline and tactical intelligence that stunned the Senate. Rome sent both consuls against him in 72 BC. He defeated them separately. Lucius Gellius Publicola and Gnaeus Cornelius Lentulus Clodianus, each leading a full consular army, were beaten by a man who had been property 18 months earlier. The Senate was terrified, not because Spartacus could take Rome, he almost certainly could not hold it, but because of what his existence implied. If slaves could organize, could fight like soldiers, could defeat consuls, then the entire foundation upon which Roman wealth and power rested was a fiction maintained only by violence and habit. The slave economy was not a peripheral feature of Rome. It was Rome, and one Thracian with a kitchen spit had called the bluff. Here is the detail the ancient sources preserve and historians still argue about. Spartacus marched north. He fought his way through Italy toward the Alps. Freedom was right there. The mountain passes that led to Gaul, to Thrace, to home. His entire strategy, insofar as we can reconstruct it, was escape, not conquest, not revolution, departure. And then his army turned around. The sources blame Crixus and Oenomaus, the Gallic and Germanic commanders who wanted plunder rather than freedom. Some scholars suggest that Spartacus himself changed his mind. The truth is unknowable, but the consequences are not. The army fractured. Crixus took 30,000 men south to raid Apulia and was destroyed by Gellius near Mount Garganus. Spartacus, hearing of the defeat, held funeral games in Crixus's honor, forcing captured Roman soldiers to fight as gladiators. The symbolism was exact and devastating. He made Rome look into its own mirror. The Senate now gave command to Crassus, who understood that this war required not just military force but psychological annihilation. Crassus revived the ancient punishment of decimation, executing every 10th man in units that had shown cowardice. He built a wall across the toe of Italy, a ditch and rampart stretching nearly 40 miles, to trap Spartacus in Brutium. Spartacus attempted to cross to Sicily, where a fresh slave population awaited, but the Cilician pirates he had paid to ferry his troops took his money and never came. You are standing on the southern coast of Italy, the sea black before you, the greatest army of the unfree the ancient world has ever seen at your back, and every direction is a closing door. He broke through Crassus's wall in a winter storm, losing perhaps a third of his forces, and marched north one last time. But Pompey was returning from Spain with fresh legions, and Lucullus was landing at Brundisium from the east. 3 Roman armies now converged. In the spring of 71 BC, near the headwaters of the river Selle in Lucania, Spartacus turned to face Crassus for the last time. Appian records that before the battle, Spartacus was brought his horse, and he drew his sword and killed it in front of his men. If they won, he said, he would have many horses. If they lost, he would not need one. He then fought directly toward Crassus himself, cutting down 2 centurions who stood in his path, trying to reach the Roman general in single combat. He was wounded in the thigh. He went to one knee. He kept fighting.